On this episode, I'm going to be talking about self and co-regulation, and this is part of the emotional engagement series in season 2 of the Experimental Parent. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Experimental Parent with me, Jasmine Jialing. So this is also a very critical step to me in emotional engagement, because a lot of the times when we entered into parenting, we probably didn't realize how much self-regulation we needed in order to co-regulate with our children. And as the saying goes by Kevin Heath, our children are like mirrors. They mirror whatever they hear, they see, they do. So we have to be good reflections for them. And this rings so true for me, as you probably have heard from one of the first few episodes of my first season of the Experimental Parent. I said that this dawning, this realization that I really needed to work on myself came when I became a parent, because everything I was saying, the way I was acting, was reflecting back at me via my child. He was mirroring everything I did, and in him I saw how I have been like, how I've been showing up to everybody in my life all this time. So really, plainly speaking, parenting brought out the worst in me. It really pushed all my buttons, and it really just pushed me all the way to my limits. But my children were also the greatest catalyst and impetus for me to change myself so that I would become a better reflection for them. They were the reason, the biggest catalyst for me to move into a different space of self-improvement. And that was something that nobody else could have done in my entire life. Even I couldn't change myself, but my children got me started on that journey. And therefore, we got to ask ourselves, what do we want our children to reflect back? What version of ourselves do we want to show up for them so that they reflect back something that we like to see? And that is why in this process of co-regulating with our children, who at this point in their lives are developmentally not able to approach from a logical and calm state all the time, this is where we come in. And it's so important for us to first realize that we cannot even begin to co-regulate with our children if we cannot even self-regulate. So if we are falling prey to our emotions, if we are just letting the raw versions of ourselves come out and showing up in the worst possible versions of ourselves, that is what our children are going to learn from us. And this co-regulation is just going to be them feeding off whatever energy we're giving to them. So if we're just showing them very intense, dysregulated versions of ourselves, this is the kind of versions they're going to learn, and this is the kind of version that they will become themselves as they grow up. So I'm going to use one of the big feelings that I struggled with most, anger. And in this journey, of course, my children are still really young, so my husband and I are still figuring this out all the time, and we are just taking turns to be showing this huge emotion, anger. And that is why it really motivated me to document our journey and my discovery of what worked and what didn't work when we come face to face with the emotion, anger. So one day while I was reflecting on my interaction with my older child, and it was one of those moments where I felt angry, of course, I realized that we were embroiled in a cycle of anger, my child and I. So in that particular instance, when my child asked for something and I said, "You can't have it," then he started to say things that sounded really rude and very audacious to me, right? He started saying, "I don't like you, mommy. Go away, mommy," right? And when he said that, wow, you don't say that to your mother, right? So I got all riled up, and I was like, that it was very rude. You shouldn't be saying that. Whenever you ask for something, I always try my best to give it to you. And I went on like full lecture mode about how this was wrong, and he shouldn't be saying that because I don't do that, and blah, 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 right? And all of that heightened, that tone, the intensity that I was saying all those things riled him up as well. So now his spikes are all out. He's all porcupine mode, spikes all out, and he starts to get very defensive and even angrier than he was when he started out, right? And he starts to shout and start yelling and saying no and so on. And me seeing how out of control he was, how ridiculous he was acting made me even angrier, and all those shouting and all that screaming was just triggering me even more. Remember, I talked about patterns in my previous episode. So I'm feeling really triggered right now, and I felt the need to defend. I felt the need to attack, in fact. So I went full on and started shouting even more. So now you can see that the intensity of our conversation just went up, and then I mirrored it, right? I mirrored the intensity because he was saying, he was getting upset and saying, "Mommy, go away." And then I matched that intensity by also being equally angry. And then now as I go up, he's matching it. And we're all just escalating our anger with each other. One party escalating the other person's anger more than before. And that made me realize that we were just in this vicious cycle of anger. We're just gonna keep getting mad at each other till who knows when, until somebody calls truce. And so that made me think, why did we have to get to this point before we can call truce and say, okay, something's not right, one of us has to simmer down? Why did we have to get to this point when, from the very start, at the point when he first showed his annoyance, it's not anger yet, right? Intensity low, it's annoyance. When he first showed his annoyance, why couldn't I have quelled it? And how could I have quelled it then, so that we didn't go up and become in a cycle of anger? So that's when I realized we had to break that cycle of anger. And it's up to us, because we have the ability to, we have that logical mind to, and the awareness and the knowledge to stop that. So we should take the lead in that. And why was I joining him in intensifying our emotions? So that led me to think, if we're going to break this cycle of anger, we should then look out at other emotions that we can engage. So if you look at Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions, or you can just Google emotion bank, and I'm sure many of these would come up. Apart from anger, what other emotions could I have engaged? And at that point in time, when I said you can't have that, and it made him annoyed and told me to go away, there were so many other emotions I could have engaged. I could have engaged trust, wonder, surprise, serenity, joy. There were so many emotions that I could have used, and in the form of either diverting his attention to something else, or helping him see a possibility that he didn't previously see. There were so many ways I could have done that, and I didn't. I chose to join in with that escalation of anger, and therefore this led me to documenting how we can break that cycle of anger. One key thing that I did take away from all these experiences that I've had, or that I've observed of various parents, including my partner in crime, my husband, and introspectively looking at it myself, I realized that one important thing that we have to keep in mind was not to normalize yelling. When we easily turn to yelling to communicate our needs, or our unmet needs, or the rules and boundaries that we wanted to enforce in our children, in fact, the credibility of what we're saying decreases. That is because when we yell, and we just, ever so often we yell, we normalize this yelling as a form of communication. Our children just tend to also, take this yelling with a pinch of salt. Every other day they're yelling anyway, right? Yelling is my mom's way of communicating. It has normalized for them. So whatever you're saying doesn't really have much impact anymore. Whatever you're saying is yelling anyway. So it's not as if because you yell, that message is stronger. It's like, oh, she's just yelling again anyway. And imagine years down the road when your children become teenagers and young adults, and this is still how you communicate your needs. Not much of what you say is going to go in, and it's not going to have much impact on them, because that's just how you've always been. Right? That's how we've always just been communicating. So don't normalize yelling. When you're able to say what you need to say in a firm but neutral and calm manner, you are actually not joining in the intensity, in the escalation, right? So if your child is going like, go away, mommy, I don't like it, right? Okay, and you're saying in a manner, okay, I understand, Liam, that you don't like it. Yeah, there's a better way that you can say this instead of communicating rudely, because when you do that, my feelings get hurt. You know what is a respectful way to talk, and you're not showing it right now. So you're saying it in a very neutral manner. And if you keep talking at this intensity, your child will eventually kind of come down to match this intensity. You know how when we are speaking to our friends or whoever, right, if they're really getting very excited and they're talking very loudly and they're like, yeah, oh my god, I know, right? You will probably join in with that same volume. You're actually matching that volume. It's the same when somebody speaks to you in a certain accent and you're trying to match the accent somehow. You don't realize you're doing that. That's what we do in communication. We actually try to match the volume, the tone, the intensity of the person that we're talking with, and we naturally do that. Okay, so even if their children want to be angry, when you keep on speaking in that neutral tone, invariably they are actually coming down. They may not even realize they're doing that, but they're coming down to match that level. So it's very important to keep that intensity calm, neutral, but firm. You can be upset. You can be upset and you can enforce the rules and boundaries, but you don't have to yell to communicate it. You can just say it in that tone. You still communicate that message. Now, when that situation occurs where you really need to raise the intensity of your voice because they're either endangering themselves, their lives are at risk, or you really need to show that you're mindfully showing that you are frustrated and angry because you really want them to see that change in your emotion. The moment when you raise your voice, okay, and it, like I said, I reinforce, it shouldn't happen on such a frequent basis. It's a rare occasion when you do. Guess what? The impact that you make is greater because your child knows that, oh, in any other situation, mommy would not react in such a strong manner. Mommy would not raise her voice in that manner. And the one time she does, I'm more likely to pay attention. I am more likely to tune in and say, okay, something's not right. Yeah? So your credibility increases when you're always able to mindfully keep your tone firm but calm. Yeah? And when you mindfully raise it, they know that you have to pay attention. Yeah? This is like me turning on the loudhailer to get your attention, and you've gotten it. So a couple of months ago, my husband had to go on a work trip, and that was just immediately after we came back from a personal trip that we've had. And I was particularly worried about that time because, me solo parenting, I didn't feel confident that I would be able to do that. My husband has been such a strong support in this co-parenting journey, and the whole thought of him being away and being absent just threw me into a state of stress. I was really stressed about it, but I knew that feeling of stress was not serving me well because I would then overthink into all the various scenarios that everything could go wrong, the various scenarios that I would just end up being annoyed with my children, and I will just assume the worst of them, whether or not they were really doing something to warrant a scolding, right? And I would most likely be very unhappy being around them. So in all that awareness, I told myself, okay, I can't be like that. I need to shift out of this stress, overthinking, negative spiral, and negative thinking spiral, and hence I told myself I'm going to set a no yell challenge for a week until my husband gets back. So I'm going to issue myself a challenge to not yell at my children, no matter how angry or how annoyed I might be with them, for just 1 week. And if I can succeed, I would just, feel that I've made progress already. I'm not looking at anything beyond a week. Once my husband is back, I will feel, okay, I have support again. And the moments I feel I'm losing control, I can tap out and my husband can tap in. Guess what? This no yell challenge turned out to be life-changing for me. And I'm happy to say that until today, it's been months now, until today, I have not needed to yell. Rather, I've been able to control myself from yelling at my children, but I was still able to get my points across and enforce the boundaries I needed. So here's how I did it. So I did a few mental exercises with myself, but some of the notable ones that I will share in this episode is really this visual exercise of how I need to keep my tone below a certain radar. So how the sound dashboards, when we talk, and on the speakers you can see our voice going up and down, right? And sometimes when you adjust the microphone beyond a certain point, it goes like ee, right? It goes into a screeching sound. So I always just put out this mental exercise in my mind, this visual in my mind, to always keep that tone below the ee level, because otherwise I'll be screeching and it will be really unpleasant. So when I feel myself going up to the point where I might hear that screeching sound in my ears, I do something or I say something to tone it down. So what do I do to help to tone it down, right? Both my tone and the intensity of my emotions, to keep it below that radar. A couple of things, but I'm going to share most notably the 4 C's that I found helped me to not only get through the No Yell challenge, but help to improve my overall connection with my children and my overall engagement with them. Thanks for tuning in to the Experimental Parent. Remember, we are all in this together. So if you have a story, topic suggestion, or feedback you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. You can DM me on the show's Instagram, The Experimental Parent, or leave a comment here. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like or subscribe so you never miss out on future episodes. Your support means the world to us. So let us know, how was your experiment today?